I recently got to sit down and interview Jason Diggs, the author of the new book called Conflict Equals Energy: The Transformative Practice of Authentic Relating. This book and the interview are jam packed full of resources that you can use to create deeper connection, have more authenticity, build more trust, and better communication with your partner. I highly recommend it. I bought his book and I'm really enjoying it. And this interview specifically was streamed live in the Epic Marriage Club. This is just one of the perks that members of the Epic Marriage Club get on a regular basis is they get to see these interviews happen live and they can interact with us and ask questions. And if that's something that you're interested in, just go to epicmarriageclub.com. There's tons of other amazing perks, and the cost is less than the cost of one therapy visit for an entire year of membership. So I hope that you come check us out over at the Epic Marriage Club, and I hope you enjoy this interview. Hey everybody, Nate here today with Jason Diggs. Dude, I'm stoked to have you on the show. Let me tell y'all what. There's a little bit of backstory I want to share to introduce Jason, because I feel like it'll provide a little bit of context, and then I'm excited to hear you kind of talk about your expertise. So a couple years ago, I lived in Austin for a summer. Austin, Texas, my favorite city in the country. And it's an amazing place. And I had a friend while I was there who said, "Hey, dude, I want to take you to go experience this event." And I'm like, "Well, what's it about?" He's like, "I can't really explain it. You just got to trust me. Just come." And he's like, "You'll love it. It's really awesome people. They're all really friendly and welcoming, and they all kind of have this growth mindset. And I think you'd really fit in. And I want you to come." And I'm like, "Okay." And so I show up and we go up into this kind of like loft area. And it was like a big open room. And I proceed to get kind of like introduced to people as they show up. And then they set these ground rules. And we ended up doing an evening, like a couple hours worth of activities called authentic relating games. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is a lot of fun. Like, I learned a lot about myself in the process. I got to know people. It felt like the way you typically meet people, it's very surface level, like in a social setting. And we just went so deep, so fast with certain individuals. And I was like, this is really fascinating. And I enjoyed the game so much that I ended up like doing a little bit of research and getting like a booklet that had some of the games listed in there, and hosting a couple of activities with my friends where we would play some of the games and kind of mimicking, without even realizing this was an official thing, the whole setup. And then just recently, Jason reaches out to me and he goes, "Hey man, I just wrote a book and I'd love to come talk about it with your audience." And I did a little research on Jason, and it turns out like you're a big deal in the authentic relating community.
Thanks.
Right? Aren't you?
Yeah. Me and my co-founder have taken authentic relating and put 2,000 people through this course called The Art of Being Human.
Yes.
And I spread it to Bali and certain places in Australia, and moved to Europe and was spreading it out there for a long time. And then I got a little tired and I came back home to Colorado. But the community is really interesting because it's kind of like this decentralized movement.
Yeah.
And there's kind of about 6 of us that are major teachers of this form and these sets of practices and tools. And there's actually probably about 200 people who are leading it out there just in their living rooms in these kind of smaller events. So it's really interesting field. And I just wanted to put all of the practices and the tools in one place. That's why I wrote the book. And I spent the last year doing it. And this is fun. I like hearing your story.
Yeah, it's been a really convoluted story, and it feels a little serendipitous to kind of have you on the show now, or just here like doing a little chat with me. So I don't know a whole lot about you other than the fact that you've traveled the world spreading this authentic relating message, and you just wrote a book called Conflict Equals Energy. And it's all about the transformative practice of authentic relating. And so I had such a positive experience doing it, and I've seen other people have such a positive experience doing these kind of practices. I thought it would really benefit my community to kind of learn a little bit more and understand kind of what authentic relating is. And maybe that's a good place to start, is if you could kind of break down into the most basic idea what authentic relating is and how it's different than, or what makes it so special
Yeah.
That'd be a good place to start.
Yeah, authentic relating is a set of tools, games, and practices to allow us to really develop our social and emotional intelligence. That's the way that I think of it. And there's really two main orientations in authentic relating. And one of them is what you talked about, is like, this is just fun. This is just like people getting together and getting underneath the surface in a matter of moments. And it's really good for community building. People have built communities in new cities and towns just by hosting events directly in their living rooms. And it's great for making friends, but then it has this whole other side, with which you also mentioned. We can learn about ourselves a lot through interacting in these games and exercises with different people. And we can learn a lot about how to communicate our needs in a way that actually get our needs met in relationship with others. We can learn how to create lasting bonds and friendships. We can, learn how to really craft the kind of social life that we want to with these tools as well. And so, over the years, over the last, I would say 3 to 5 years, more and more authentic relating, because it's so transformative for people. Like, if people come and practice for a matter of like 3 or 4 months, all of a sudden it's like they know themselves better. They know how to communicate their boundaries in a way that's not off-putting to other people, and so therefore they have more, like, even more self-respect. And other people, people grow like crazy in a short amount of time. And because of that factor, like the leaders of this movement, myself and the woman who started the community in Austin, and half a dozen other people, we started to frame it as like, oh, wow, this is actually emotional education, right? None of us really got that class in middle school or high school of how to communicate, how to have emotions, and how to do relationships.
That's awesome. That's such a great foundational kind of framework. So I'm sure people are curious now, like, what is they have an idea of kind of what it does, but what does it look like to participate in or to do an authentic relating activity or exercise or game?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have one game called the Curiosity Game. And it's designed to really help us reclaim the childlike curiosity that we all had in abundance, when we were 5 years old and asking why 3 times every hour, right?
Yeah.
And it's all natural in us, and it allows us, the game specifically allows us to set aside our normal conditioning and our normal way of operating in the world, kind of our adult roles that we have, and just set those aside temporarily. And all of a sudden we're getting radically curious about the person across from us, and we're just going places that we would not normally go. And ultimately it helps people really have more fun and get more connected in social situations. But the Curiosity Game specifically, it's just like a workshop exercise, right? It has a timed round for, this is what you do in round 1, this is what you do in round 2. And, there's something called sentence stems. There's hundreds and hundreds of sentence stems that we have developed in authentic relating. And so after you play the Curiosity Game with someone, these are the 2 sentence stems that you answer with the person. And the course that I developed, called The Art of Being Human, we actually go through about 10 of these exercises in 2 days. And we get people, it's experiential learning. So we get people sharing a lot, and people get time to like really connect with everybody there and talk about the practice. And because it's actually been developed by multiple teachers over the past decade, there's actually a huge curriculum. And that's why I wanted to put it all in one place in the book.
I love that. So one of the things that I noticed when I did these activities is that there's a set of guidelines or rules around each activity. And I think that having like a great structure helps people feel kind of safe and grounded when they participate. Mm-hmm. Why do you think it's important? One of the things I noticed when I did do it is that people were opening up a lot more than they would to complete strangers in a very short amount of time. Mm-hmm. can you talk about that balance between like that the safety and the rules, and then the kind of permission and ability to kind of go deep fast and connect with somebody on a like really sincere level, and how those two things play a role together?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, setting context is one of the main tools in authentic relating. I call it the Swiss Army knife because
Yeah.
a tool, it literally can be used in so many different situations. So if we set the context for a particular thing to happen, like going deep, just by having rules and guidelines, and here's the different rounds of the exercise, and we're 30 people in a room, and here's our agreements. Like a lot of authentic relating communities do agreements. So here we practice honoring ourselves, we practice honoring others, we practice a learning attitude and being at our edge, and we practice all these different things. And there's something about that creates safety. And I think it's because of the way our nervous system's actually developed. So for hundreds of thousands of years, we were actually in tribes of 20 to 120 people. And we knew everyone. And we really adapted and evolved to pay really close attention to social cues and whether or not we were rejected or accepted. And now we live in a society where you go into any public place and you probably know no one.
Yeah, you're a stranger among strangers.
Yeah, we're just interacting with strangers so often, and so it's not happening at the level of our conscious mind, but our unconscious is constantly scanning for safety. Right? It's constantly scanning, like, is this person going to help me, or is this person going to betray me? Right? And that's just natural. And so, creating community, creating safety, creating tribe is really something that we need to deliberately do in our modern world in order to be able to, like, it's just natural. Like, you don't talk about the most sensitive parts of you unless you're with your best friend that you've known for 10 years, or you're with, the intimate partner that you've been dating for a year. Like, until you get that close with someone, right? You don't open up all of those deep parts of yourself. That's just natural. Well, what authentic relating is doing is it's just communicating a lot of safety, giving a lot of structure so that we can just go deeply. And like, literally, you can come out of a 3-hour event with a new friend, someone that you feel like you've known for 6 months or something like that. And it's because of the structure, like you're talking. Yeah.
That's really awesome. And I feel like that's a principle that can translate outside of authentic relating as well, where if you do want to deeply connect with somebody, it's really important to set ground rules, to set boundaries, to create agreements with them in order to make you both feel safe and secure and respected. I think when you don't have those expectations in place and those agreements in place, it's easy to come into a conversation, especially harder conversations or conversations where a connection is wanted, and only have your guard halfway down, still kind of like expecting to have to defend yourself or whatever. Yeah. And so that's a powerful and really cool principle. I would love to hear from you. Could you share some stories of like cool breakthroughs or lessons that you have seen people experience, or transformations that you've seen people have while practicing authentic relating?
Well, the biggest one and the biggest theme, and this is why the book is called Conflict Equals Energy, is people have breakthroughs around speaking the truth, like just saying the thing that you would normally sweep underneath the carpet and just not share because, there was a little tension around it, or a little awkwardness around it, or like you didn't feel totally respected or something like that. And people learn how to bring those things forward. And through skillful communication, it actually ends up creating more connection, right? It allows us to be ourselves more and bring more. It actually creates aliveness. I like to say, telling the truth just feels good, right? And if we're just like not sharing, all of these things, like take a work situation or something like that. There's all these things we don't say or don't share because, our livelihood is on the line. and like our unconscious is actually tracking for safety, and there's all these things that we don't say. Well, so many of the breakthroughs come when people start to speak up and say, hey, I don't want to be treated that way. I do want to be treated this way. And obviously it's a little bit longer of a conversation than that, but you're essentially training other people how to treat you, right? Because other people don't know what's going on inside your head. They don't know what kind of person you are, and they don't know what your values are as a human being unless you actually get into deeper relationship with them. And so ironically, the thing that allows us to get into deeper relationship is the ability to navigate conflict and tension. There's this quote, I put it in the book somewhere, but I really like sharing it because it's a fun one. So in the second Matrix, there's this character called Seraphim, and Neo and Seraphim are fighting, and they're doing all the kung fu and everything, and and Seraphim goes, stop, and Neo's like, what do you mean? He's like, I'm not your enemy. He's like, well, why are we fighting? And Seraphim goes, you never truly know someone until you fight them. Right? And there's a certain way that like we just bump up against each other as human beings, especially like living in the same household. That like all of us have had that experience with intimate partners or roommates or something like that. Recently with the quarantine and everything like that, we rub up against each other, and there's like a small tensions and irritations that happen, right? Well, if we can gain the skill set to navigate those things, it can actually lead to more connection, and especially knowing other people better and knowing ourselves better. I like to say it leads to connection, clarity, or creativity. And clarity is just like, oh, what are my deeper values that have me wanting to be treated this way and not other ways? Right? Who am I? How do I communicate who I am with assertiveness and strength in the world? And if I'm not doing that, people just don't know how to relate to me, right? So it actually increases our sense of self. And that's why, authenticity is a really big part of it. Is like our authentic selves as adults needs to be grown and reinforced.
Yes.
Through our relationships, through our interactions. It's a process, right?
100%. And I think, all I do is couples work. I just work with couples 24/7. And I think many of the biggest struggles that couples bump into come as a result of a lack of authenticity. There's something that's being unspoken or that's gone unspoken for a long time. There's emotions or experiences that need to be dealt with that either one or both people don't know how to address. They don't have either the skills or the emotional capacity to bring those things up. And so these things fester and fester and fester until they explode. And I love that that what you're doing is helping people develop those skills and develop the practice of being authentic to themselves so that they can show up wholeheartedly in the world and in their relationships. It's a very beautiful thing. I want to point something out too to people who are watching or listening who haven't experienced these activities before, is that some of them are very deep. Like some of them go very emotional, like very deep below the surface, and require a lot of an ability to kind of like hold on to yourself in a tornado of emotions, and that helps develop some really awesome skills. But a lot of these games and activities are also very simple.
Yes.
And the simplicity of them actually makes it really easy to develop. Despite the simplicity, there's powerful lessons packed into them.
Yep. So, a lot of the games are very fun, and like you could even bring it into, if you're on a new date or you're just on a date with someone who you've been with for 6 months or 6 years, and you could like bring in this exercise.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you're encountering new territory together. And so, I like that. What you say, a lot of the exercises require courage and vulnerability and go very deep, but other ones are really just designed for fun and being able to explore new territory together.
I'm trying to you can tell me if I'm mistaken and remembering some of these, but I'd love to give just like a quick sample of some of the things that I remember from doing these. There was one, I think there was one that was like a noticing game where you like sit across from somebody and you take turns saying what you're noticing. And it can be something visual. It can be something like a feeling that you have, a sensation in your body. And I don't remember the exact premise of it, but I remember after finishing that activity, realizing that I never ever would have to run out of anything to say in my life. I would never have to be that couple. I would never have to be sitting next to my wife and just not have anything to talk about, because I'm always noticing something.
Yes.
As soon as I tune into myself, whether it's the sensations in my body or what I'm observing out in the world or in my memories and my thoughts, if I tap into my emotions, there's something that I can notice that I can share with my partner. And in times of conflict, it's weird how this one time I did this activity, it stuck with me. Even in times of conflict, my wife and I have been sitting down having a conversation and emotions start to escalate. And I'll say something like, wow, I'm noticing that my chest is feeling really tight. Or I'm noticing that I have a tension in my neck, or I'm noticing that I'm starting to feel a little bit defensive. And just noticing and speaking the thing that I'm observing has helped me to communicate with my wife better and to manage conflict in a better way. And this is an activity I did like 8 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And it stuck, that one little skill, that one little lesson. And obviously there's probably more context around it. If you wanted to go into it, you could, but I just want, like, it's a simple activity that has deep and profound consequences and lessons tied into it.
Yeah, in a sense, the noticing game is the most foundational because it directly exercises our awareness, and the more we can be aware of. And I liked what you shared around, like, oh, I notice that there's a tension in my chest, or I notice I'm becoming defensive, right? Because there's a humility in that. If you, instead of being defensive, you're sharing with your partner that you're feeling defensive, and all of a sudden that like gives her a bunch of emotional information that, because admitting that you're becoming defensive, guess what, is actually the opposite of defensive. It's
right.
Right. And it's also a way that we can own up to and admit when we're not being that skillful without going into shame. Right. And so, yeah, I love you pointing into that exercise. And there's all these different realms. Like, we can notice physical sensations in our body. We can notice dynamics between me and you. We can notice, that we often say things this way and do things in this way, and let's try it a different way. Noticing can actually be a bridge to creating something new, or kind of illuminating, like, okay, this is a kind of a stagnant pattern or a rut in our relationship, right? And noticing can be a way to bring it up that's non-threatening. And so, yeah, it's kind of like the master game. And then it's really interesting the way that the curriculum and movement has developed. In the game, in the book, I talk about like these 12 core games that are kind of like teach these core lessons, but there's actually hundreds. And, the book also has 30 sentence stems, which, sentence stems and doing those kinds of things together are kind of, it's like infinite territory that we can explore through sentence stems.
Explain what a sentence stem is.
It's just a words that you start with and you complete the sentence.
It's like a prompt.
A prompt. Yeah. So, I was leading an online session recently, and I gave them a couple of sentence stems to do in a small group. And one was, a way I want to be seen by others is, right? A way I want to be seen by others is. And this one's quite psychological. It kind of gets into like how we're presenting ourselves to other people. And then the other sentence stem I gave them to balance that was, if this were our last day on earth, the adventure I would want to create with this group is. Right. And it's like, it invokes our creativity. A sentence stem is like a prompt that starts us in a particular direction, but we can be creative and we get to be ourselves fully in how we answer it. Yeah.
Dude, you could write like 6 books just full of just sentence stems, and it would be so powerful and so cool.
I know. A friend of mine is working on a card deck for couples, and there's there's 60. Yeah, she's only has the beta version so far, but she sent it to me, and me and my partner have been doing this. We just took a road trip this weekend, and literally we would just pull a card while we're driving, and one of us would answer it. And I remember we pulled like a total of 4 cards between us, and we ended up in this like 45-minute far-reaching conversation that had us feeling so connected after, and like in the middle of this drive. And then we just went back to like looking out the window and being, silent. And it's just like 4 sentence stems just provided all that richness. And
that's amazing.
Yeah.
I want to share one other just example of an activity that I remember doing, just to show the lesson that's wrapped in something so simple. So this one, I don't remember the name of it, but I think we lined up across from each other, and one person was like the caller, and the other person was the actor, and the caller would give a hand signal of like either come towards me, stop, or move away from me.
Yeah.
And then the other person had the choice of whether or not they wanted to like obey the hand signal or not obey.
Yeah.
And that was really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Did I kind of explain that right? Or
yeah, it's a game called Come Stay Go.
Come Stay Go.
And you start like 10 or 12 feet away from each other, and one person is giving a hand signal, beckoning the other person or to stop or to take a step back. And what this illuminates is so interesting, because we're constantly in these leader-follower dynamics. In any good partnership, one person is leading some of the time and the other person is leading in other times, or one person is leading these particular areas. Often it can be the woman who's leading in the areas of communication and emotions, right? And often if it's a heterosexual couple, it's the man is leading in other areas, and having that balance and being able to be a leader and a follower is essential to being in a cooperative relationship. Because I know for me, as a man, if I feel like I have to be the leader all the time, it's exhausting, and I don't actually do well. It's like too much emotional pressure, right? But if we're resisting each other's leadership, or I guess I should say the places where we are resisting each other's leadership, that's good growth material for the relationship, because it always happens. None of us wants to be told to go away or to stay or to come, all the time. It's like that would be way too much to be in the follower
partnership that way. It's a manager employee. It's like that's, and I remember doing this activity and how initially I was like, this is stupid. And then I started doing it and I was like, because as silly and simple as it sounds, like some of the things I got out of it was like, I noticed that I had discomfort saying no to the person who was directing me at first. Like disobeying the order gave me a sense of anxiety. And I was like, oh, like this is just a game, but I've been raised in a world where being disobedient is a very bad thing. And like, can I say no to something if I don't feel like it's the thing that I want to do? There's a sense of like learning boundaries, learning to be able to stand there despite what other people are telling you to do and say, I don't feel like doing that right now. And that's okay. And not having to feel guilt or shame around it. There's things that you can learn about, like your inner defiance, am I saying no to you because I don't want to do it? Am I saying no to you or yes to you because of what you represent in my life? Like, maybe you say no to people of the opposite gender because you've been hurt by somebody of that gender before, and you just don't want them telling you like, there's so much to unpack in little moments of just like moving backwards and forwards and having somebody tell you to come and go or stop. I don't know. To me, it was like this really powerful example. If you're willing to like lean into something a little bit uncomfortable and outside your comfort zone, the lessons that can be packed into something so simple if you're willing to like look inward at yourself. How much of doing authentic relating requires you to step outside your comfort zone?
I would say the majority of it, like 90% of it. It's
Why is that important?
well, I think it's the place where we grow emotionally, right? Uh, we have our whole lives to get better at communication and get better at relationships. So, there was this Harvard study that was done over the course of 75 years, and they were tracking what makes a fulfilling, rich relationship or fulfilling, rich life. And, especially coming to end of life, being over 80 years old and not having any regrets, that kind of thing. They were studying it and researching it really in depth. And of course, what they came to is a very common sense conclusion. Enriching long-term fulfilling relationships is the number one thing that provides well-being, provides health, longevity, and the ability to come to the end of our lives with few regrets. And so, if you could think of it this way, somewhere around in our 20s, we complete our education and kind of choose a career. But then that's when our emotional and social education really begins. Like, how do we give our gifts to the world in a workplace where we need to cooperate and compromise with a dozen or 2 dozen or 3 dozen other people, right? That takes emotional resilience. That takes emotional intelligence. And so we can continue to grow for our entire lives in these areas. And so stepping outside of our comfort zone has a huge benefit long-term to us because we continue to grow.
I really love the way that you said that, and I want to see if I can reframe it in a way that I think needs to be said. So doing authentic relating requires you to step outside your comfort zone, and stepping outside your comfort zone is important because that's where growth happens. And unless you invest in your emotional intelligence and your capacity to kind of navigate your emotions and your feelings and your heart, you can't grow in your relationships.
Yeah.
Now, I want to reflect that against this I think cultural idea that we have that if we're unhappy or uncomfortable in a relationship, it means there's something wrong. And after hearing you say what you said, it sounds to me like if you're uncomfortable in a relationship or there might be some conflict or tension, that actually there might be something right. That if you're too comfortable in your relationship for too long of a time, it means you're not growing. It means you're not developing your capacity for deeper emotional connection. It means you're not, in a sense, investing in your relationships to the capacity that you could in order to ensure that you have the type of life that you want. And so maybe there's a juxtaposition there of between what we expect, which is like bliss and happiness all the time in a relationship, in a romantic relationship, and you contrast that against what actually we experience, which is a constant sense of discomfort that comes with opportunities for growth. And to me, seems to me like what you're doing is giving people the key to turn that discomfort that they're feeling that's coming from a place of conflict into something productive.
Yes, exactly. Conflict or tension in our relationships is an opportunity. It's almost like a message from the universe of like, hey, look at this thing. Hey, get clear about what you want because you're kind of fuzzy in this area and it's affecting your partner, right?
Yeah.
And I loved the way you said it. So the last
Thanks for following me down that rabbit hole. I was trying to untangle a couple of ideas.
No, I loved it. And the last part of the book is about how to handle conflict and tension in our relationships. The last couple of chapters, and it gives very specific skills and specific processes for two people to work things out together. But really, the first 2/3 of the book is actually about connection and all of these different ways to know ourselves and all these communication techniques. Because in a sense, the authentic relating games, it's kind of like Karate Kid. It's kind of like wax on, wax off, sand the deck, paint the fence. And then when we actually end up in a tense situation, or we're having conflict, it's because two people care about something. There would never ever be conflict if two people didn't care about something. And very often those people are representing different values that are both very important. Like one person is representing the value of compassion and one person's representing the value of integrity. And that's why you're fighting, right? And if you can really learn to unpack these things and slow down and listen underneath the words that people are saying to the values and the needs and all of that, and that's what the book really details is, practices for doing that. There's an entire chapter on listening, for instance. If you can do that, literally like 40 or 50% of the time in your relationship, you will be growing like crazy. You will feel connected. You will feel alive. You'll have amazing moments and richness in the relationship. There'll be, a sense of passion. Obviously not all the time, but those elements will be there in the relationship on a weekly basis if you're actually facing the conflict and the tension that the messages from the universe, so to speak. And so, but most of us never received education on how to do this. And so of course we avoid it. And that's the one thing I wanted to share, related to an earlier point is like, yes, most of our challenges in romantic relationships specifically are due to lack of authenticity, but that doesn't mean that we're inauthentic people. That doesn't mean we're lacking integrity. That doesn't mean we're, that there's a problem. We live in a society that in general just models inauthenticity for us, right? And it's actually takes a lot of skill and a lot of courage to be authentic, and it takes embracing discomfort, which you talked about as well.
That's awesome. It's a brilliant point. And essentially what we're doing is combating culture in a lot of ways. And yeah, there's so much to unpack here. So I want to take a little segue and maybe ask for a piece of advice here. So let's say, authentic relating oftentimes is practiced in a large group. But if you were to give advice to a couple who's hearing this interview and going, this sounds really interesting, I kind of want to learn more about it, I want to learn more about these activities and maybe do them with a partner, what advice would you give somebody who's just coming in and wants to do this with like a romantic partner?
Sure. So there's, if you want to get the book, the book is available for $9 on Kindle, $19 for the paperback. It is a resource. So there's 30 sentence stems in the back of the book. There's some very simple games like the Google game, for instance, that's really about just creating a deeper connection. And what I would recommend is just setting aside time to create connection, to explore new territory together through conversation. And that alone, I know a lot of people have time demands in terms of work and kids and all of these things that you have to juggle, but just setting aside whatever time that can be, even if it's a couple of dates per week, per month or something like that. And then using these tools to uncover who the other person is, like really treating them like they're a mystery and that you don't know them. And that takes a certain attitude or a certain mind shift, especially if you've been living with this person for years, right?
Yeah, you think you know them.
Yeah, well, we become familiar to each other. And this is how the brain works. When something is familiar, we just assume that it's going to continue to be that way for the rest of our lives. And then the brain creates a shortcut and puts someone in a box, and so that the brain can actually have the energy to meet other demands of life. Familiarity is in a sense, it's like a less alive state. It's like, oh, that's the garage, or that's that group of people, or that's, the way my partner behaves in this situation. And it's a tremendous kindness to actually press the reset button. And it's like, no, I don't know this person. And there's something magical about that attitude of curiosity, where all of a sudden our curiosity and asking our partner new questions, or exploring new territory together, really allows them to come out more. Like, maybe they don't have the venue or to come out the way they want in their lives, but it's almost like our creativity, or our curiosity actually creates a new opportunity for the other person to explore who they are as well.
Yeah. Like maybe the way you, just to give a more concrete example of what this could look like maybe when you met your partner, they were introverted and shy and not very adventurous, but deep down inside of them, they had a seed, like a desire to be more spontaneous and more adventurous and more of a risk taker. And if you put them in the box of, oh, my partner would never be interested in that, they're not an adventurous person, you could go decades and your partner may have grown to the point where it's like, yeah, I do want to go skydiving. We had this happen in my family a couple of weeks ago. It was my dad's birthday back in May, and we're trying to think of what to get him for his birthday. He's like 60 years old. What do you get a guy who he can get anything for himself that he wants, essentially. And I'm like, why don't we get him flying lessons? And so we told him, we're gonna send you up in an airplane. You're gonna go flying. And he's like, am I gonna jump out? And we're like, what? And he's like, am I going skydiving? And he's all excited. And we're like, why would you want to go skydiving? He's like this really kind of introverted engineer who we've always kind of put into a box. He's just not an adventurous guy. And I'm like, would you want to go skydiving? Because it's the same price. Like, if you want to go skydiving, we can talk. He's like, yeah, I would love to go skydiving. And I just had this moment of my brain switched. And this guy that I thought was my dad was now there's this new thing there of, my dad is not this nerdy, uptight, zero adventure, safe guy. He's a guy who wants to jump out of an airplane at 60 years old. That's crazy.
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
And so exactly what you said, I think we do get used to kind of compartmentalizing people and just assuming, hey, this is who they are. This is what they do. This is how and they're never going to change. When in reality, there might be hidden desires and things that our partner wants to do and be and experience that we just don't ever give them the opportunity or don't even entertain because we think we know them. And the moment you start tapping into this is the moment that you get to these miracle moments where you get to unlock this new side of your partner that's been kind of growing and blossoming beneath the surface. And if you never have that curiosity present, that the little seedling never breaks through the soil, you never get to discover it. And it's this whole, there's so much potential that just gets left behind. So I get excited just hearing you talk about this, because this is the stuff that I think sets the average couples apart from the extraordinary ones. Is the extraordinary ones are the ones who stay curious and give their partners that opportunity to continue to grow and develop and evolve as humans.
Yeah, it's a beautiful story. Yeah, and we're all starting right from where we are. There's probably some couples who listening that do have a buildup of resentment from not talking about things, and do have some stagnation and just the pressures of life, and authentic relating. It can provide just this whole, it's almost like a psychological vacation, or like an emotional weekend getaway. It really refreshes what's happening, and we can only start from where we are and the relationship that we're actually in. And if you're just working on the problems in the relationship, quote unquote problems and challenges all the time, that's too much emotional labor for anyone, right? You need to be introducing new ingredients that are we're feeling connected, we're feeling synergy, we're feeling, and so I think authentic relating can just give us the tools and skills to be able to bring in those new ingredients, and then we can come back towards the challenges with some more connection and some more teamwork.
Awesome. I love that. I do think focusing on the problems will exhaust you, and
Mm-hmm.
that's a great point. You do need to reconnect over and have fun together, even if you're in the middle of something that's kind of tough. So Karen is watching live, and she had a question here. She
Mm-hmm.
said, "Do you have any advice on a helpful way to present this idea of authentic relating to a partner whom is kind of resistant? They might not be super on board with it." So, my assumption is she's listening, going, "Hey, this sounds kind of cool." But if I present this to my husband, maybe it's a little too woo woo, or maybe he's going to be like, "You want to do what? You want to play what game? Like, this sounds kind of dumb."
Mm-hmm.
And I get that. Like, being a guy who's been in that situation, how would you approach a partner to kind of participate or do an activity like this,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe bring that resistance down a little bit?
Yeah, I think there's a way in which these tools and practices, they're very translated. A lot of them do come from the world of personal growth and psychology and even spirituality, but they're so translated into very everyday language. you know and so I think that has to do with this tool that I called, it's almost like the master tool in authentic relating is setting context, is um, enrolling your partner into the benefits that you're going to receive from doing this, rather than talking about the thing, like, oh, I want you to do this workshop, and or I want to do this exercise with you, and maybe they're in the background thinking like, oh, she's trying to change me again, and she's dissatisfied again, and there's these buildup of patterns. But to actually work on, I want to feel more connected to you, and I want I want us to be able to laugh more in our relationship, and this is a way to like get into some of that. Yeah, and I think we can all be at that learning edge, that growth edge, only where we're starting from. So I don't know. What do you think? What do you think, Nate?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think it needs to be a focus on benefits, and I think you need to start at the shallow end of the pool.
Yeah.
You're not going to want to dive in deep at the forefront. And I was actually going to follow up with you and ask, like, maybe you can, as we wrap up this conversation, if you'd be willing to share with us, like, one activity that we could do that's like really simple with a partner to kind of like test the water, that might bring some smiles to a face or be a little bit more approachable, and that might help her get a little bit of context.
Yep. So this is the book, Conflict Equals Energy.
Here, I'll put you full screen here.
Yeah.
Let me just take myself off.
And
that's you. There you go.
This is the book, Conflict Equals Energy. And, there's 12 chapters and all these games. And there's actually 30 tools in the book. But then the end has a big reference. So there's 30 sentence stems, and there's a bunch of games. And one of the games is called the Google game. And I like to recommend this to people because it's the most accessible portable thing. Like, you could play this sitting next to an airplane, sitting next to someone on an airplane with your masks on. You could play the Google game with them to create connection if you wanted to. Cool. And essentially, it's prompting personal stories. The purpose of the game is to like prompt stories from the person's past. And you would just say, okay, if I was to Google you and turtles, Nate, what would I find? And like, you go into your index of memories, and anything that has to do with turtles, you would just tell that story for 1 to 5 minutes. And then the person who's prompting can even say, oh, I want to double click on this thing that you said. Right. And you just take turns. And I mean, there's a little bit longer description in the back of the book, but it's so simple.
That is really simple. And it's a really cool way to explore your partner's world. Mm-hmm. And you could pick just like any random word, couldn't you?
Yeah. Or phrase, it's like, I want to Google you and, the pictures on your wall behind you. And then all of a sudden you're just telling stories where you got some of these things and what they mean to you.
I want to do that real quick.
Yeah.
So this right here is Darth Vader.
Yeah.
And underneath it says father right here.
Oh, wow.
And I just became a dad. And my sister-in-law cross-stitched that for me by hand, which was really, really sweet of her.
cross stitch.
Yeah, so like you take string and you like do a little pattern, and she basically like hand.
It's a Darth Vader with roses. So I want to double click on Darth Vader. Why Darth Vader?
I have no idea. I mean, I love Star Wars, and he's Luke's father, and I don't know. I think she found the pattern somewhere and really liked it and made it for me, and I was like, oh, that's really sweet. And then like over here, it's reflected in my screen. Anyway, over here you have the Deathly Hallows from Harry Potter.
Oh, cool.
And I love Harry Potter. My wife and I actually just started rereading Harry Potter. It's the first time I've reread it since I was a kid. Mm-hmm. And I read to my wife every night as we are in, like when we get in bed together. I read a chapter to her out loud and I do the voices and stuff. So that's really fun. And I'll do one more. This one right here is the quote, "Let's make the most of this beautiful day." And that's a Mr. Rogers quote.
Oh, sweet.
And Fred Rogers is one of my heroes. And I look at him and like the kindness and compassion that he had and the way that he showed up in the world and how he was a father to millions of children who didn't have access to like a real stable parent. To me, that's like somebody worth looking up to and striving to be more like. And that's kind of the way I try to live my life is I've asked myself on multiple occasions, what would Fred Rogers do right now? And it rarely leads me astray.
That's beautiful. Yeah, he was definitely influential in my childhood.
Was he?
Oh yeah. I loved that show and the land of make believe, especially. Yeah.
I love that. Can I reflect it back at you?
Yeah, sure.
If I were to Google you and the word travel, what would I get?
Whoa. So I've loved traveling my whole life, and it's like, it brings in so much newness and freshness. And actually, when I was starting my company 3 years ago, we did a few courses here in America, like Chicago and New York City, and you know, we were a brand new startup, and it was difficult to get it off the ground. We weren't really making any money yet, and then we actually ended up doing a course in Bali, of all places. And I just had this one contact in Bali, and you know, we tried to do another course in like Sydney and another course in Thailand, but those didn't go as well. But the one in Bali, we had 29 people. It was our first really successful course. And I ended up feeling called to just stay there. Like I was supposed to be in Bali for 2 weeks and teach these things. And I ended up staying for 2.5 months. And meeting a partner out there. And then I came back to Colorado and I put all of my stuff in a storage unit and I moved to Bali. And I literally moved to Asia. And it was like so exotic. It was so different, you know, zipping around on mopeds and then from there, I actually moved to Amsterdam for 9 months and I was teaching in Europe. And over this 1.5 years, it really worked. It really worked to help us build the company. But I was so effing exhausted. It was
yeah, it's hard.
Those long intercontinental flights. Like I think I counted one time, I took 14 intercontinental flights over the course of 1.5 years. And that was, I'm not even talking about a flight between Amsterdam and London. Like I'm talking about changing continents. And
that's exhausting.
And I was so burned out, and I came back to Colorado, and honestly, like I've scratched that travel itch, and it's like, it's not even that strong anymore. Like I just want to stay home. Like if I need some adventure, I'll just drive a couple hours into Western Colorado and do some hiking.
I love it. So you did a lot of traveling, grew your business, got burned out, and now you're just happy to be at home in Colorado for a while. Yeah,
a different phase of life, and being in Colorado, like I pretty much haven't left Colorado barely at all in the past 1 year and 4 months, and that allowed me to write the book. And yeah, I feel very rooted and planted right now.
That's great. Well, I'm excited to dig deeper into your book. I just bought it. And I'm going to go through and do a lot of these things with my wife, and I wouldn't be surprised if we do them with my kid as she grows up. And I love the intentionality with which you have built your business and created this book and created this community, and how there's a purpose behind it, and that purpose is authentic human connection. And I don't think there are that many people out there who have that focus in their minds. And if there's one thing that I hear over and over and over from couples who feel like they need help in their relationship, or they want more from their relationship, it comes back to connection. Yes. I want more connection. And the fact that you provided so many great resources here with your book and some of the activities that you've kind of mentioned, I think it's going to open up the door and give some really great ideas to couples to like go deeper and strengthen their friendship and deepen that connection. And I'm really grateful for that, man.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the work that you do in the world, and congratulations. Yeah. Thank you for having me on, and congratulations on being a new dad.
Thanks, man. Yeah. Is there anything else you want to share before we sign off? Like any thoughts that I didn't ask the right question that you could present it, or anything you want to plug?
I mean, I just want to share that, like, I am really passionate about authentic human connection, as you said, and I feel like super available. If people want to reach out to me, or you want to interview me in some way, and you have an audience, large or small, doesn't matter. I feel very committed to building the worldwide community and authentic relating. And, my company has an online course too, like a 6-week, like if you really want to take the deep dive, we do 3 hours every week for 6 weeks, and we have the online course, but we're still doing in-person workshops. Kind of limited here in the US to much smaller groups. I did a course with 14 people a couple of weeks ago in my own living room, which is interesting. Wow. And, but we have course leaders, teaching in Europe quite a bit now, because it's safer to be in groups there. And so we have courses in Copenhagen, Stockholm, and London, and Amsterdam, and all of that. And so, just look us up and check out those offerings. And obviously the book is the way to get the on-ramp really quickly in. And so, that's called Conflict Equals Energy. And this is, in a sense, like my offering to hopefully help humanity really communicate about some of the challenges that we face as a society. And I love that, like, all of the tools and practices apply directly to romantic relationship, but also our workplace, relationships, and our friendships, and our family relationships. It's very universal in that way.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. All right, man. Well, I hope listeners and viewers of this jump out there and buy the book. It's super affordable, and it's packed with really valuable information, it looks like. Mm-hmm. Once again, thank you so much for being so available and for sharing your message with my people. Look, I am a firm believer that most couples don't need therapy to have a great marriage. But it's incredibly rare that you'll ever get the type of marriage that you're capable of without a little bit of guidance and encouragement. There's just too much working against you. Whether it's the fact that you didn't grow up with good examples of marriage, or the terrible stuff that we get exposed to from Hollywood and reality TV, or just the fact that you're two imperfect humans trying to create an amazing life together, even though nobody has ever taught you how to do that. Now, I'm a firm believer that working on your marriage shouldn't have to feel like work. And that's exactly why I created the Epic Marriage Club. Here's how it works. You get regular monthly workshops and trainings from the top marriage experts in the world. Then, every single week, I transform those lessons into an actionable experiment that we'll do together, because you only get results when you take action. And you'll be doing these experiments with an amazing community of awesome couples that care as much about having a great marriage as you do. Plus, I'll do a monthly Q&A session to make sure that you never get stuck or hung up on anything. It's literally everything you need to have a truly epic marriage. And the best part? It's freaking fun. You get all that and a whole bunch of other awesome stuff that I haven't mentioned yet for the price of a movie ticket. So go sign up right now at epicmarriageclub.com.